Speaking of Cade Cunningham, I don't know if you saw, but HoopsHype has been doing their top 30 positions, and Cade Cunningham was ranked the 13th best point guard by HoopsHype. One, what did you think of this list? And two, do you think Cade was properly rated by HoopsHype?
Yeah, so, when you hear Cade, 13th best point guard in the league, your knee-jerk reaction, if you're a big Cade supporter and believer like me, it's like, that seems about right, maybe a little low. And then you see some of the names that he's ahead of, and it seems pretty generous. Honestly, it's right where I would probably peg him if I'm being completely objective and not letting my fan bias get in the way. I think he was one spot ahead of LaMelo on that list, and I think LaMelo has faced a lot of the same concerns as Cade has in his first couple of years, right? Injuries, not being on the best of teams, even though the Hornets have won a few more games in their time there. But I thought it was about right. I mean, it seems low just because Cade's been really good on a bad team, but there's just 12 other really elite point guards in the league right now.
I tend to agree. Like when I was reading the list and I was going through it, for people that haven't seen the list, I'm going to put it on the screen for you guys real quick. This was the top 30. Cade is slotted in right there at 13th to what Jacob was talking about. LaMelo's right there. James Harden. Jrue Holiday, it still bothers me that he's 18th. I don't know why. It's a two-time champion. Like, I'm like, really? Jrue Holiday 18th, but Cade is right there at that 13th slot behind Jamal Murray, Kyrie Irving, Trae Young, all those guys. But kind of bothered me that Jrue Holiday was 18th. I was just like, really? He just won another NBA championship with another team, and he's not even like the bubble, like top 10. I don't know, but I thought for the most part, the list was pretty accurate for the point guard rankings. And I think there's a chance that he could crack into the top 10 if he has a good season like he did last season. He's going to have more spacing now, obviously. Who's to say he can't go like 22, maybe close to 10 assists and a couple of rebounds a night on efficient shooting?
Yeah, and even if he just hypothetically kept the same stat line that he had last year, 23-8 or whatever, if they were just a more competitive team, that stat line all of a sudden becomes a lot more impressive to people who are not Pistons fans, right? I think a lot of it's just held back by the win total because his stats are not far off from guys who are making all-star games like Paolo and these other guys, other point guards too. I think a lot of it just has been a product of the situation. And if we were just a 30-win team instead of a 14-win team last year, I think that it wouldn't be out of the question to say that he could be debating with those guys like De'Aaron Fox and Trae Young for that 10th spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has the potential to, put himself in as a top 10 point guard in this league. He has all the tools, 3-level scorer. Seems like he's just like the mid-range king on this team. Every mid-range shot, I think it's going to go in. It just looks cash. Even shot 35% from three, which I think is good. I think he could get possibly up to 37, 38. I think adding a guy like Fred Vincent can, uptick everyone's percentage and help them become better shooters. But I thought 13th for the most part was fair. Now, HoopsHype also released their shooting guard rankings. And they had Jaden Ivey ranked as the 24th best shooting guard. Now, this is where I think I don't necessarily agree with this list because they have small forwards in this ranking, which is kind of clunky. For people that haven't seen the list, this is the list of the shooting guards. So obviously you have Ant Edwards, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, Jaylen Brown, and Jalen Williams in your top five. And then if you scroll down the list, you have guys like Jaden Ivey, Jordan Poole, KCP, and Jordan Clarkson kind of above him. But what were your thoughts on the shooting guard rankings and having Jaden Ivey as the 24th best shooting guard?
It's just a tough one with Ivey because a lot of what I believe about Ivey is just pure hypothetical at this stage, especially coming off of last year where his role was different every month. We all know what that situation was under Monty at the start of the year. Had some games where he was like the sixth guy off of the bench, not the sixth man, like the sixth guy that checks into the game off of the bench. And it's just hard to put him any higher. And I get it from like their perspective, right? I think that there's a world where Jaden Ivey is improve this year. Talk about Fred Vincent, right? If Ivy all of a sudden becomes slightly above league average shooting and below, still using that speed to get by people, all of a sudden the roof is just super high with him. But as of right now, based on just looking at last year and his production, it's hard to argue him any higher on that list. Even guys like Caruso that are behind him, I think if you asked competitive teams in the league right now who they'd rather have, Caruso or Ivy, most of them are going to say Caruso, because I think a lot of this stuff with Ivy is still hypothetical. I'm a believer in him, but just based on his production last year, which was a lot of times seemed like it was out of his control even, it's just hard to argue him any higher than that, to be honest.
Yeah, last year was so weird for him because I think a lot of us coming into the season thought that we were going to see a Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey backcourt to start the season. And it was Killian Hayes.
Here comes seven.
And we're like, okay, well, maybe Jaden Ivey just wasn't, maybe wasn't ready for that week. And then it went on for like a good half the season where Killian Hayes was in the starting lineup. And you can kind of look at the starting lineups if you guys want to go back on the Pistons Twitter account. It was just like Isaiah Livers, Killian Hayes, Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart. And you're just like, what year is this? 1990? Like, there's no damn spacing around this team. And you have one of your better scorers off the bench, not getting reps with your franchise player, who a lot of people think that, Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey can be that next great Detroit Pistons backcourt together. And you kind of wasted a whole year of development. You wasted a whole year of what they could possibly be. And obviously that was a Monty Williams decision because, Troy and Tom said, yo, bro, what the fuck you doing? We just drafted this guy a couple of years ago, 5th overall. We want to see what's there with him. But in terms of the rankings, I honestly, I could see him. Oh, wrong one. My bad. I could honestly see him around that 13 to 15 range if he has a good season. You have guys like Devin Vassell, Malik Monk, and Cam Thomas. I think he has another gear to get to that pathway. And when he was consistent throughout the season, I would say certain months where he was shooting a high volume from three. I remember there was a game where he hit 7 threes, hit 30 points. I think that's where I could see him in that range, in between that 13 to 15 range, if he's just more consistent. I think the thing with him, and you touched on it, is we don't really know what the type of player he's going to be. We don't know if he's just going to be this, electric superstar guard, or if he's going to be, possibly a sixth man. I think there's a lot of question marks of what he's going to be. I think a lot of fans in the Pistons community think very highly of him and think that, a big reason why there were so much issues was a coaching issue, and I tend to agree with it. But I think the rankings for right now are fair. He just has to show not only Pistons fans, but, NBA writers that make these lists that he's more consistent, because there were stretches, and I think it was February, March. I think he shot sub 20% from three.
Yep. And then you have another month where he was 38, 39%. And that goes all the way back to his rookie year too. There'd be month-long stretches where he's hitting and month-long stretches where he's not. So it's just I don't know. The best version of Ivy is good as Cam Thomas, is as good as Vassell. But are we going to see that version of Ivy consistently is really the question, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with him is just consistency, because when he puts it all together, you have an electric guard with a really fast first step, transition nightmare. He got better defensively last year. I will give him that credit. It's just he has to be more consistent, and I think he will be with the right coaching staff. Sounds like JB Bickerstaff has a plan for him, wants to stagger him and Cade Cunningham, as a clear-cut plan of how he wants to run sets with them, which is refreshing to hear a coach that actually has a plan for him and not just saying we'll see. Yeah. I'm really refreshed with JB Bickerstaff. Every interview I listen to him, I want to run through a wall. I was like, finally, we have a coach that wants to be here and actually has a clear-cut plan. But I think for the rankings, fair for now, but who's to say he can't kind of like crack into that, top 15 if he has a consistent season this year?
I agree 100%. And everyone loves to talk about what the new players like Beasley and Harris and all of them can do for spacing for Cade, but it's just as much for Ivy as it is him. He can get by anybody. And if they're in more of a 5-out type of setting, or even 4-out, 1 in, Duran's coming to set a screen for him or whoever it is in the game, like you give that man more space and he can use it to his advantage just as well as Cade can. Cade will use that space in a different way. But if the paint's more cleared out and Ivy has a more clear path to the hoop, his finishing might look more like it did in Purdue, especially at the rim numbers, which probably haven't been as great as what some Pistons fans thought it would be when we drafted him. I think that, that could just help him as much, maybe even more than Cade having all that space out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to finish around the rim when you have the lane clogged with 2 centers out there, basically. It's like, man, there's no room for me to get to the basket right now. I don't really think we're going to see those 2 big lineups anymore, thank God.